There are towns that disappear from the map, not because of war or weather or time, but because someone wanted them forgotten. Wanley, North Carolina was one of those places. I know because I was there when it ended. They called it a containment incident, but it wasn't a virus or a chemical spill. It was something smaller, stranger, something that was already inside us. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what they did to keep the rest of you safe. So if you've ever poured yourself a glass of milk, you might want to stop for a minute and listen. This is the story of the town that vanished. This is the story of Wanley. If you drive through Wayne County, North Carolina, you won't find Wanley on any GPS. There's no town square, no welcome sign, not even a post office anymore. Just a stretch of cracked asphalt surrounded by grass and the ghosts of driveways that lead nowhere. But it used to be there. People used to live, work, and die there. And I was one of them. Wanley wasn't much. 3,000, maybe 4,000 people in its prime, back in the 1990s. We had a metal roofing factory, 2 dairy farms, a feed mill, a high school, and one of those little business incubator parks that never really took off. Everything else was cornfields and silence. People started leaving in the late 80s when the factory threatened to move south. By the time I turned 13, Wanley already felt like it was bleeding out. Half the houses on Main Street were empty. The high school football field was mostly weeds, and the diner closed early because there wasn't anyone left to serve after dark. Still, it was home. My mother, Raniel, everyone called her Rani, was a nurse. My father, Morgan, was a lawyer who mostly worked cases out of Wilmington but refused to move us. He said small towns were safer for kids. My little brother Omis was 10 back then. He had an imagination that could make an empty backyard feel like another world. I didn't realize how fragile that world was until the spring of 1993, the month the word milk started meaning something completely different. It was a Friday in late May, the last month of middle school. The bus rattled its way back toward town, and 2 kids in front of me were arguing about their new Super Nintendo game, Star Fox, I think. I tuned them out and stared through the dusty window. When we passed the old "Welcome to Wanley" sign, something looked wrong. There was a man in a sheriff's uniform, painting over it with a roller. He wasn't covering the name, he was adding something. 2 letters, both block white, N-O. Beyond him were flashing lights, 3 cruisers, and a truck parked across the road, blocking the way into town. The bus slowed. The chatter stopped. Even the Star Fox kid shut up. The doors hissed open, and a tall policeman climbed aboard. He looked too friendly, mustache-mirrored sunglasses, hands resting on his belt like he was posing for a brochure. "Hey there, kids," he said, smiling. "I'm Officer Kellen. We're just gonna have a little talk, all right?" A weak chorus of "Yes, sir" went through the rows. "Good," he said. "We just need to make sure everyone's safe." He motioned for the driver to step outside, then leaned down a little, lowering his voice. "See something? Came into town this morning. Something we don't want getting out. Nothing to worry about, but we have to be careful. So my partners are going to check your bags real quick. Make sure nothing unhealthy hitched a ride." No one understood what that meant, but we nodded anyway. 2 more deputies boarded and started opening backpacks. They didn't look for weapons. They looked inside our lunchboxes. When they reached the boy in front of me, they whispered questions. "What did you have today? Did you drink anything? When was that?" He said chocolate milk. One of the deputies clicked his radio twice. The other nodded. When they reached me, I said my mom had packed fish sticks and rice with lemonade. The officer smiled in relief. "Sounds safe enough," he said. "You'll be good now." They finished searching, thanked us, and then quietly told the Star Fox kid to come with them. He started crying, asking what he'd done. They promised to call his parents and said everything would be fine. It wasn't. As the bus started moving again, I glanced out the rear window. Officer Gellin was still there, standing by the road sign. The paint on it had dried to white under the afternoon sun. It now read, "Now leaving Wayne. Lee, no milk. Our parents were waiting at the stop when we got back. All of them. That never happened." My mother was crying. My father's arms went around me the second I stepped off. He smelled like sweat and gasoline. "What did they ask you?" he said, shaking. "Did they take anything from you?" Before I could answer, Mom pulled me away. "Enough, Morgan. Let's go home." Amos was standing beside them, clutching a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic, completely unbothered. He'd gotten home on an earlier bus and had no idea what was happening. Down the street, men in camouflage walked door to door with rifles. One of them shouted for people to go back inside. Behind him, smoke drifted from somewhere near the Anson dairy farm. I asked Dad what was burning. "Fireworks," he said. But the sound that followed wasn't fireworks. It was too sharp, too close, too controlled. When we turned onto our street, the whole neighborhood was outside. The Masons were yelling at two fire marshals. The Stevensons were loading bags into their car. Our other neighbors, the family with the big TV, were gone. The front door hung open, and a piece of paper was nailed to the frame. I only caught one line before Mom ushered me inside. "By order of the National Guard, Contamination Zone." "Go to your rooms," Dad said. "We'll talk over dinner." "What's going on?" I asked. Later he said too quickly, "Just stay in your rooms." Amos looked up from his comic. "Can I play Nintendo?" "As long as you want," Mom said softly. "No bedtime tonight." He grinned like it was Christmas. It took him a second to notice she wasn't smiling back. We ran upstairs. He powered on the console. I sat by the window. Outside, the world was changing. The Stevensons' car was gone now. The Masons were being herded back inside by soldiers. Far off, the sky above the dairy farms glowed orange. Black shapes moved against the firelight. Maybe trucks, maybe something else. Every few minutes came that dull, popping sound again. I kept pretending it was fireworks, because my father had said so. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. It was Amos. His face looked pale, his eyes glassy. "Can you help me with my science project?" he asked. "It's acting weird." He'd been working on it all week, testing different kinds of milk to see which spoiled fastest. He kept the samples in plastic cups, covered with cling wrap. "Mom says it smells too much," he added, "but it's moving." I followed him to his room. The smell hit first sour and metallic. The cups were lined up on a tray near the window. The plastic wrap was trembling, not from wind or vibration, but from inside. Something shifted beneath the surface like a heartbeat. I leaned closer. At the bottom of each cup was a lump the size of a marble pail and pulsing. Thin white threads pushed outward, poking the plastic from underneath, as if searching for air. It looked like mold trying to hatch. "It keeps doing that," Amos whispered. "I didn't touch it, I swear." I pressed my finger against the wrap. The strands reacted instantly, shooting upward, dozens of them, wriggling towards the warmth of my hand. Don't touch it, I yanked back. We have to get rid of it. He hesitated. Should we tell Mom downstairs our parents were arguing again? Mom's voice had that high pitch she used only when she was terrified. No, I said. We'll just throw it away. He protested, but I promised to take the blame. That worked. I grabbed the tray still wrapped and carried it to the bathroom. I found a pair of plastic cleaning gloves under the sink. The cups quivered as I lowered them into the toilet. When I peeled back the first layer of plastic, the threads burst upward, writhing wildly. They were longer than I thought, 5, maybe 6 inches, and they moved like electric wires, twitching toward my face. I screamed and dropped the cup. The milk inside wasn't milk anymore. It was alive, squirming, coiling around itself. Strands reaching for the sides of the bowl. They brushed the gloves, searching for skin. I flushed. The water swirled, but the things fought it, gripping porcelain, like they understood what was happening. I flushed again, and again. On the third time, they finally disappeared down the drain, twisting as they went. I sat on the floor, shaking, staring into the bowl for a long time. A thin film of white residue clung to the water's edge, like something had melted there. I poured half a bottle of cleaner in and flushed one last time. Only then did I breathe again. I wrote 2 words at the top of my notebook. No milk. Then I listed every place in Wanley that used dairy. The farms, the grocery store, the high school cafeteria, even the ice cream stand by the gas station. 24 spots at least. If whatever I'd just seen was in one kid's science project, it could be anywhere. Downstairs, someone banged on the front door hard enough to rattle the frame. Amos and I froze. Dad's voice came first, then a stranger's, lower, commanding. Mom's footsteps pounded the stairs halfway before she stopped and shouted up at us. Stay in your rooms. Do you hear me? Stay there. But Mom... Now. Her tone cracked on that last word. Through the window, I saw lights flickering outside, red, white, blue, reflected in the glass of the neighbors' windows. A soldier walked past his shadow, long across our yard. He carried a rifle. Amos whispered, "You think it's bad?" "Yeah," I said. "What's so bad?" "There's something wrong with the milk." He looked at me confused. "But you flushed it right. Not just that milk," I said quietly. "All of it. All milk in town. It's gone bad. Worse than bad." Before I could explain more, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Mom and Dad burst through the door, pale, sweating eyes wide. They told us to stay calm, stay close, and not to ask questions. Behind them, a man in uniform ran towards the bathroom I'd just used. Seconds later, he sprinted back out, shouting into his radio. Whatever was happening, it had already spread. The man who ran out of our bathroom yelled something I couldn't hear. Then more soldiers came through the front door, mud on their boots, rifles in hand. They didn't knock. They didn't even look at us. Within minutes, our house was full of strangers. "Get the kids in the car," one of them ordered. "Containment zone, in effect," Dad argued. "We haven't been told anything." "You're being told now," the soldier snapped. "Out. Move." We were rushed outside into the night. The street that had always felt so familiar was unrecognizable, flooded with lights and uniforms. The Masons were out on their porch, shouting at a fire marshal. The Stevensons' house was empty, their windows dark. A military truck idled at the end of the street. Blue tarp stretched tight across its bed. Something underneath shifted and bumped against the plastic. A soldier hit it twice with the butt of his rifle. We piled into the car. Amos clutched his comic book to his chest, too scared to say anything. Dad turned the key, but another soldier leaned down to the window. "You'll follow the convoy," he said. "Drive straight to the high school gymnasium. Don't stop for anyone." "What's going on?" Mom asked. The soldier hesitated, then simply said, "You don't want to know." He stepped back and Dad hit the gas. As we drove, I saw more signs. Hand-painted boards nailed to fences and storefronts. No milk, no dairy. By order of the National Guard. Everywhere we passed, people were being turned away at checkpoints. Some argued, some cried. I saw a woman pounding her fists on a car hood, screaming for someone to give her baby back. We drove past the Anson farm. The smell hit us first burnt meat, and something else sour and chemical. There were flashes of orange through the smoke. For a second, I thought I saw shapes moving in it, thin, twisting too many for cattle. Mom covered Amos's eyes. Dad whispered, "Don't look." When we reached downtown, the traffic stopped. A line of military trucks was moving across the intersection, each covered in blue tarp. They were stacked high with something heavy, sagging the material inward. The convoy seemed endless. Then one of the trucks lurched. The tarp split slightly, and I saw movement inside, sharp white, glinting under the floodlights, pressing outward like claws. The truck rocked violently. Soldiers shouted, running alongside it. Someone screamed for everyone to get back. Dad swore under his breath and threw the car in reverse. "We're not staying here." "Where are we going?" Mom demanded. "Anywhere else." We turned down a side street and kept driving until we hit the edge of town. The next checkpoint stopped us cold. A young woman in a hazmat suit waved her hands and shouted through a respirator mask, "You can't leave, the perimeter's sealed." Behind her, a metal gate was being welded shut across the road. Mom started crying. Dad just stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the wheel. The soldier approached, lifted her mask slightly, and said something that still haunts me. "Go back. It's in the pipes." By the time we got to the high school gym, it was midnight. The place looked like a refugee camp, rows of cots under harsh fluorescent lights. People whispering, soldiers standing at every exit. We were told to sign in. Dad wrote all 4 of our names. They gave us wristbands, green ones. Some people had yellow, others had red. No one explained the difference. The air smelled like bleach and sweat. I recognized a few faces from town teachers, neighbors, the man who used to run the corner store. Everyone looked terrified. "Where are we supposed to sleep?" Mom asked a soldier. He pointed to a row of cots near the bleachers. "Stay put. Someone will come talk to you." No one did. For the next few hours, all we heard were snippets of conversations. A man complaining that they took his freezer. A farmer cursing about how they shot his cows. A teacher whispering about lactic acid bacteria, something mutating in the milk. I tried not to listen, but certain words stuck in my head. Parasite, symbiotic, growth, airborne, risk. Across the gym, a teenage girl was crying, her hands clutched to her stomach. A nurse tried to calm her down, but the girl kept repeating, "It's moving. I can feel it. It's moving." Mom went to the restroom and didn't come back for almost an hour. When she did, she looked pale and distant. Dad tried to talk to her, but she just kept shaking her head. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm just tired." When the soldiers walked their rounds, people pretended to sleep. One man was coughing deep, ragged wet. When the patrol passed by, they stopped beside him. 2 men lifted him up by the arms and carried him toward the exit. He was still coughing when the doors closed behind him. I didn't see him again. That night, felt like it would never end. There was a giant clock above the scoreboard. Every tick echoed through the silence. I lay on my cot, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, counting the seconds between distant screams. Dad slept, sitting up, one arm draped protectively over Mom. Amos was curled on his side, his comic book still clutched in his hands. I must have drifted off at some point, because when I opened my eyes again, the gym was darker. Most of the lights were out. Only the exit signs glowed red. Someone was whispering near the doors, a soft, rhythmic sound. I couldn't make out the words. I sat up. The drunk man who'd been muttering earlier was still awake, staring at the ceiling, murmuring something over and over. "They dance," he said. "They dance in the stars. Little white worms reaching through the sky." I tried to ignore him, but my skin crawled. Then I noticed something else. Mom's cot was empty. Her shoes were still there. Her wristband too, but she was gone. I nudged Dad. "She's not here." He woke instantly. "What, Mom?" "She's gone." He looked around, scanning the shadows, then grabbed my hand. "Let's go find her." We slipped between the rows of sleeping people. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and fear. At the far end of the gym, 2 soldiers were sitting near the bleachers, passing a bottle between them. They didn't notice us. The bathrooms were down a short hallway. The door was half open, the fluorescent light flickering inside. Dad whispered, "Stay behind me." The women's restroom was dim moonlight, seeping through a frosted window. Water dripped somewhere. Every stall door was closed. Rani Dad's voice trembled. "Honey, it's me." No answer. We split up. He checked the far stalls. I checked the near ones. I knocked gently on the first. "Mom," nothing. The next one, still nothing. Then I heard a faint wet sound, like something shifting against tile. It came from the last stall. Dad met my eyes. "Stay back." He reached for the door handle. I stopped him. "Let me. It'll be quick." Before he could argue, I pushed the door open. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The light was dim, the shadows wrong. Mom sat slumped against the wall, her hospital scrubs soaked through. Her hands rested on her stomach, which was swollen far beyond what it should have been. She looked peaceful, like she was whispering to herself. Then I realized she wasn't whispering, she was humming. The lullaby she used to sing when I was sick as a kid. Dad stepped forward, reaching for her shoulder. "Rani." She lifted her head. Her eyes were wide and glassy. Her lips parted, and I saw movement beneath her skin, something shifting, crawling just under the surface. The skin of her abdomen bulged, then twitched, then rippled. White filaments pushed through slick and thin, like threads of spider silk. They wriggled outward, testing the air. The humming turned into a wet gurgle. More of them emerged, dozens, maybe hundreds, sliding out of her skin, dripping onto the floor. They coiled and twisted together, glistening under the pale light. Some reached toward us, sensing warmth. Dad yanked me backward. "Don't look," he shouted. But I did. Her stomach ruptured like curdled milk, and the things poured out, writhing, pulsing alive. They weren't worms exactly, but strands, each no thicker than a wire, moving with a terrible intelligence. They clung to the tiles, climbing toward us. One brushed my shoe. It felt cold. Dad slammed the stall door shut and dragged me into the hall. Behind us came a sound. I'll never forget a thud. Then another. Then a chorus of tapping, like 1,000 fingertips beating against metal. "Get Amos," he said. "Get to the car." "Dad, she's..." He grabbed my shoulders. "Go!" Another bang from inside the restroom door, harder this time. The hinges rattled. I ran. Back through the hallway, past the rows of sleeping people, past the soldiers who were now shouting and fumbling for their weapons. The gym erupted in chaos. People were waking screaming. Someone yelled, "They're out. The worms are out." A man convulsed near the bleachers, his body arching as something white forced its way out of his mouth. I turned away and ran for Amos. He was sitting up now, rubbing his eyes. "What's happening?" "Get up," I said. "We're leaving." "Where's Mom?" I didn't answer. Gunshots echoed behind us. I took his hand and we ran. We didn't make it far. By the time we reached the main floor, the gym was chaos. Screams, shouts, gunfire, everything blending into one endless terrible noise. People were running in every direction. The lights flickered, throwing everyone into strobe-lit panic. A woman stumbled in front of me, her shirt soaked in something white and thick. She reached for me, gasping, "Help me, please." Then her jaw locked open, and a river of filaments spilled out, writhing like wet hair. They slapped against the floor, searching. I pulled Amos back before they touched us. Soldiers shouted orders that no one followed. "Contain it. Shoot if you have to. Get the door shut." But it was too late. The first infected were already bursting open skin, splitting along invisible seams. The air reeked of sour milk and rot. Everywhere I looked, something was moving that shouldn't have been. The gym floor turned into a nightmare of white threads, crawling toward warmth, toward life. "Keep your head down," I yelled to Amos. We crawled under the cots, moving toward the emergency exit. Someone grabbed my ankle. I looked down. It was the drunk man from earlier. His face was pale, his lips trembling. "They're in the pipes," he rasped. "In the water. You can't." Then he convulsed his throat, bulging, as something slid out between his teeth. I kicked free. We crawled faster. A rifle went off nearby, deafeningly close. Bits of plaster rained from the ceiling. Someone screamed for their child. Someone else screamed that. It was in their eyes. When we reached the exit, a soldier stood blocking the door. His hands were shaking. "Don't go out there," he said, voice cracking. "You'll bring it with you." Behind him, I saw the parking lot, dozens of tense people, running some on fire. I didn't wait. I shoved past him. The door burst open, and we ran into the cold night air. For a second, I thought we were safe. The night was still the stars, sharp against the black sky. Then I looked back at the gym. Through the windows, the fluorescent lights glowed a sickly yellow. Shadows writhed across the walls, moving, twisting. And then, the lights went out. I couldn't hear the gunfire anymore. Just silence. We crawled behind a row of flower beds, using the tall blue sunflowers as cover. My heart pounded so hard, it hurt. "Where's Dad?" Amos whispered. "He'll find us," I said. He told us to get to the car. We reached the parking lot. Cars were overturned, some burning. A few headlights still glowed weakly in the dark. Our car was near the edge, miraculously untouched. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and shoved Amos inside. He climbed into the back seat and curled up, clutching his comic again, like a lifeline. I locked the doors and ducked down. The world outside was unrecognizable. Figures stumbled through the dark, some human, some not. Their bodies shimmered faintly, as if coated in a thin white film. They moved in jerks, coughing, wheezing, pressing their faces against car windows. One stopped beside ours. A man, maybe a soldier once. His uniform was torn, his eyes rolled white. He smiled at me through the glass. Between his teeth, something squirmed. "Bad man," he whispered. "Help." He pressed his face harder against the window until his skin split and a flood of white tendrils smeared across the glass. Amos whimpered. I held him tighter, trying not to breathe. All around us, the infected gathered, dozens of them, maybe more. The sound they made wasn't human. A low rattling chorus of wet breath and scraping teeth. They didn't smash the car. They just pressed themselves against it, listening. It felt like forever before it stopped. At some point, I must have passed out. When I woke, the car was unbearably hot. Sunlight burned through the windshield. The air smelled like metal and decay. Amos was still asleep, his head against my shoulder. His skin felt feverish, but he was breathing steady. Outside the parking lot was almost empty. A few bodies lay scattered across the asphalt, covered in thin sheets of blue tarp. Soldiers were moving between them, silent and efficient. Everything looked clean. Too clean. Like the night before had been wiped away. Someone tapped on the glass. I flinched. It was Dad. He looked exhausted, eyes, sunken face, streaked with soot. But he was alive. He lifted a hand showing the spare car keys. I unlocked the door, and he opened it slowly, careful not to startle us. It's over, he said softly. We're safe now. I didn't believe him, but I wanted to. He helped Amos out, first, then me. All around us, soldiers were herding survivors into small groups. Some people were crying, others stared blankly, like their minds were gone. Dad knelt and hugged us both. It's going to be okay, he whispered. They're cleaning everything up. We just have to cooperate. What about Mom? I asked. His face went pale. He didn't answer. They took us to a tent for screening. Doctors in suits drew blood, checked our eyes, our skin, our temperature. One of them asked if we'd consumed any dairy in the last 48 hours. I said no. She wrote something on her clipboard and smiled too kindly. After that, we were given new clothes and a stack of papers to sign. Non-disclosure agreements, compensation forms, health waivers. Dad signed everything without reading. They told us the official cause of bacterial contamination from a local dairy source. A tragic accident, contained successfully. No one mentioned the worms, no one mentioned the gym, no one mentioned Mom. It's been 30 years. Wayne Lee no longer exists. The land was sold, the deeds dissolved, the name erased from every map. Drive through now, and all you'll see are foundations buried under grass and a few fence posts rusting in the dirt. The government paid us to move. New names, new homes, new lives. But you can't buy silence, not really. Not when you wake up in the middle of the night, still hearing that wet tapping on the stall door. Not when every glass of milk looks like a threat. They said 176 people died, but that number didn't include the ones who survived with pieces of it still inside them. The young women were the worst off. Many were sterilized as a precaution. Others just disappeared. Dad said it was for their safety. I know better. I found out years later that Mom had been pregnant before it happened. She hadn't told us because it wasn't certain yet. The doctors said the infection targeted lactating tissue, milk-producing glands. Maybe that's why she changed so fast. Maybe that's why they took her body away before we could see it again. Sometimes, I wonder if that thing in the stall, if that voice humming the lullaby, was still her somewhere beneath it all. Or if it was just using her to call me closer. I've moved 5 times since then. Different towns, different states. But every once in a while, I'll open my fridge and catch a faint smell. Not strong, just enough to twist my stomach. The sour metallic tang of spoiled milk. And I'll remember the cup in Amos's science project, the way it pulsed, the way it reacted. I still can't drink milk, not a drop. The thought of it fills me with panic, like something dormant inside me might wake up. They said it was bacteria, that it couldn't survive outside the host, that it was all destroyed. But sometimes, late at night, when I look up at the sky, I see those same white stars, cold, silent, and watching. And I swear one of them blinks back. They said it was bacteria, that it couldn't survive outside the host, that it was all gone. But I don't think it's gone. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and swear I can smell it again. That sour metallic scent, like spoiled milk and something else. I moved away, changed my name. But no matter where I go, I can still see the stars from that night. And sometimes, when I look too long, one of them blinks. If you ever see the word "no milk" on a road sign, don't stop. Don't ask questions. Just keep driving, because some places disappear for a reason. Short pause. Thank you for listening. This story was No Milk, The Fall of Wayne Lee. If you made it this far, maybe you were meant to. Sleep well.